Welcome back. So, if you did your geography, you probably learned about wetlands. If you still remember, well, if you don't remember, we're here to refresh your minds and why these aspects of our lives are very important. And recently, on the 2nd of February, there was a commemoration of World Wetlands Day, and we'll be familiarizing with what it is in the studios. I have Naya Piri, who is coming in from WWF, Worldwide Fund, and who'll be explaining to us what World Wetlands Day is and what the actual wetlands are. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you for having me, John.
Let's begin by, first of all, breaking the ice. What are wetlands for those that might have questions?
Good question. If you allow me, I'd just like to speak very briefly about WWF and who we are.
Sure.
So the Worldwide Fund for Nature, as you rightly mentioned, we are the world's leading conservation organization. In Zambia, we've been working for at least 50 plus years. And we organize our work towards people, of course, freshwater, which are part of wetlands, wildlife, and forests. Now, talking about wetlands themselves, now these are areas that are influenced by water, either throughout the year or periodically or seasonally. And what makes them unique is that as a result of that influence of water, they attract a certain wildlife, for example, they attract vegetation, and they provide a lot for ecosystems and biodiversity in the country. So examples of wetlands could be floodplains, for instance. You've got the Barotse floodplain, the Kafue flats. You have Mweru Tipa floodplains, Bangweulu swamps. All those are wetlands. And we'll talk a bit more about them and what value they have for the economy, for the country, and for communities.
Well, there was a commemoration of the actual day,
Yes.
which was on the 2nd of February,
Yes.
2 fortnights ago or so. Now, briefly explain to us what this day entails and the
Okay.
commemoration of it.
Excellent. Good question, Jonah. World Wetlands Day, like you rightly mentioned, falls on the 2nd of February every year. It came as a result of a convention held in Ramza, which is a city in Iran. It's an Iranian city. And essentially that convention came together to recognize wetlands as, especially those wetlands that are very important in their specific localities. So that's how World Wetlands Day came to being. In Zambia, we adopted the Ramza Convention and have got what we call Ramza sites. These are wetlands of national importance and some of them I've just mentioned, like Kafue and Bangweulu and so forth. And every year we commemorate this day just to give these wetlands the respect and to raise awareness around Wetlands Day, considering how much they provide for the economy, considering how much they do for communities and so on and so forth.
Wow, very interesting. World Wetlands Day,
Yes.
a commemoration of wetlands. However, I have a bit of information, and I was reading somewhere that they actually do help in extreme weather events.
Definitely.
And so, can you please briefly help us understand how that is so?
Good. In fact, that's a good question because the theme for this year was wetland for disaster risk management, right? So wetlands play a crucial role in mitigating extreme weather conditions. For example, and I'll put it in layman terms, wetlands are shock absorbers, nature's natural shock absorbers. So for instance, you've got floods. Wetlands help to retain that water so that you don't have water spilling out in various other areas. And on the other side, what they do is in times of drought, wetlands then release that water so that we can have areas where there's no water. You've got wetlands flowing, water flowing from the wetlands in those specific areas. So they help seriously in mitigating extreme weather conditions such as floods, and especially now that we're feeling the impacts of climate change. You agree with me that over the past few years we've had less than optimal rain pattern.
Absolutely.
Poor rainfall. And in a situation where we have more wetlands or we protect more of our wetlands, we realize that in times of drought, we're going to rely on the wetlands. And they have huge economical benefits, huge ecological benefits as well. I'll give you a quick practical example. You have the Kafue Gorge Dam, for instance. You've got the Teji Gorge as well. In the middle of that are the Kafue Flats. So these two gorges, which is where 50% of power is generated from, are benefiting directly from the Kafue Flats. So if you have, for instance, extreme weather where, in this case, we have less than optimal rainfall, Wetlands are there then now to provide that sort of absorption, so that in times when we don't have enough water, we can utilize the wetlands, use the absorbing power of the wetlands to produce water in areas where they're needed most.
Okay, interesting. Shock absorbers.
Shock absorbers.
I like that expression. It's gonna stick. It's gonna stick right here. But then there's a need to take care of these wetlands, as it were. But how can people take care of them, and why is there that need?
The need, like I mentioned, wetlands have got huge economical potential. I mean, we've talked about the Kafir Flats and how they service the two dams where the power is generated. So you agree that there's a huge economical impact. But also, there is a lot of tourism potential. I'll give you an example. The Okavango wetlands in Botswana, for instance, are the same size as the Bangweulu swamps, right, or the Bangweulu wetlands in northern Zambia. But if you look at the economic activities in the two wetlands, Botswana is using their wetlands almost to maximum potential, whereas in our case we are not utilizing them so much. So there is a need to protect them because they have huge potential for the economy. They provide a habitat for specific wildlife. You look at Kafir Flats and the endemic lechwe, which is only found in the Kafir Flats because of the specific makeup of that wetland. So we need to take care of them because we have potential to boost our tourism. Right? We've got endemic species to us that nowhere else in the world. People can come from all over the world because we have that potential. So we have to take care of them. But by and large, they also, like I mentioned, they will help in extreme conditions. Conditions that if in situations where we don't have rainfall or we have too much rainfall, they help to absorb, and we can do away with flooding. A practical example would be, look at the past couple of weeks, lots of rainfall, right? We take a stroll in town, for instance, floods everywhere. It's because we don't have enough wetlands in the city themselves. So we're not absorbing that power. So they have, unsurmountable potential.
Okay. And then now on the aspect of how people can take care of them, could you please share with us one or two pointers in which we could follow and ensure that these are taken care of, probably both by individuals and institutions responsible for the taking care of such?
Yeah. Good question, Jonah. I'll start by mentioning that many parts of Lusaka before development came in were wetlands. You've got the whole marshlands area, for example. You would know that those were wetlands, right? But we did not protect them in the sense because we've allowed buildings to be there, and we're not opposed to having buildings or development in a sense, but we need to do it in a managed manner, in a managed fashion. So there has to be integration in terms of development. How do you protect wetlands? Let's not build on them, for instance. Let's preserve them. Right now, we don't have a wetlands policy, but there is a good commitment from government to put together a policy that will look at protecting wetlands. So to be issues, for example, if we're looking at farming land, for instance, are we going to do away with the wetlands and put a farm there, for example? There are all those things that we need to take into consideration as individuals. By now and then we are acquiring plots and so forth to build our own lands and so forth. It's up to us to take a responsibility, given some of those benefits we've talked about wetlands, not to build on them, not to disturb their natural existence. And really it goes with what are we going to do with our own human activity to destroy something that's been existing naturally. So we have to take our own responsibility as individuals, but also there's a huge call for government and stakeholders such as ourselves, WWF, to come together and look at a comprehensive wetlands policy that integrates development, integrates planning. So you need, Department of National Planning as well to come on board, so that even as we are planning our cities and as we are building and as we are developing, which is in itself okay, we look at what specific areas are we not supposed to touch, because in the long run they are going to help us out. Allow me very quickly, there was a clip on social media, you could have seen it, somewhere in Minwood and Deke, right? Towards the airport. Floods there, enormous floods going on there, right? And you would make the argument that if we had more wetlands and more preservation of these wetlands, we would not have situations like that. So individually we need to look at where are we building? What is our human activity doing to the natural environment? But also institutionally, we need to say, do we have the right laws? Do we have the right policies in place that protect these essential areas?
Very interesting that you mention it now, because recently on the Q Breakfast Show we had Civic Forum for Housing on housing and habitat, and they actually raised an interesting aspect, and you've actually explained it in detail. I remember her mentioning something about wetlands, and she gave a perfect example of marshlands, which you have also referred to. So now it actually sinks in on how significant significant these are, and we
Yes,
should take them
definitely,
seriously.
definitely.
And then quickly, as we get to wind up, the 2nd of February, we had the commemoration in Zambia.
Yes,
What
yes.
characterized this
Yes.
day in Zambia?
In Zambia, well, we had a lot of awareness activities going around. We were talking to the media, for example, spreading that word out. But of significance, WWF organized a symposium at the University of Zambia that really talked about bringing in young people. And the reason we did this is, by and large, we're trying to work with young people, leveraging the energy and passion that young people have for conservation issues. So we brought together a team of experts, people from WWF, people from the Department of National Parks and Wildlife, people from Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit, to discuss wetlands with young people, because by and large this information is not out there, especially to young ones. I'll be very honest with you, some of these topics are quite new to me as well. And you get to realize that once you know about them, you have a lot of ownership of them, and you begin to spread that message beyond their typical audience. So we had a very good symposium at the University of Zambia. We had students from that university, but also students from around, young people from around the area. And we had this big discussion where, and government officials were there as well, and just really discussing the importance of wetlands. And by and large, these are the activities that we've been doing as WWF. And if you allow me very quickly, I'll just talk about some of these going forward. We have, for example, Earth Hour, which is coming up on the 25th of March this year. And again, this is a climate change initiative. It's a day that we look at climate action. We've talked about climate change just now and how these connect to wetlands, but speaking about it on its own, we're looking at a situation where we had less than optimal rainfall in the past few years. Now we're going to an area where there's potential flooding. So climate change is a real thing. And we as WWF are heavy on that subject. Recently we had a discussion with the First Lady. She's on board, and she also, agrees with some of these arguments that we're making. So coming back to the issue of wetlands, big event that we had at the University of Zambia, bringing in young people. But going forward, we have several of these such events. And we will be in touch with our friends in the media, just so that we can bring out and raise awareness on some of these issues.
All the best, and we hope that they get the significant recognition that they do, wetlands and the rest of wildlife, because we now realize the impact of climate change, and people actually thought it was a rhetorical story some time back,
no, it's
but
not.
now we're able to realize that, oh, goodness me, we can see the impacts even as Zambia. But thank you so much for coming to this morning.
Thank you for having us, Jonathan.
We'll be speaking about transparency in Zambia briefly as we come back after the break, and the Zambia Land Alliance, which is becoming a hot topic in Zambia. We do realize the importance that land poses to our nation at large. We'll be coming back after this. Remember to get in touch with us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at QTV Zambia.